Valentine's Day is coming up, and thanks to Disney and being emotionally stunted, the only thing I can think of when I think of a romantic dinner is spaghetti and meatballs because of Lady and the Tramp. So today we're gonna cook the spaghetti and Lionshead meatballs recipe from my book, because nothing says I love you than a plate of spaghetti with a cartoonishly large meatball on top of it. Let's get started. Now we're gonna make some substitutions today just based on what was available. There were, oddly enough, no scallions in my grocery store, but they had, interestingly enough, Nera green or the bulbs of garlic chives. These can be used one for one interchangeably, but you just have to use the tender parts that were on the top over here. So cutting that off and just slicing them smaller like so, just like you would scallions. If not more interesting because they are kind of funky in aroma and also have a little bit of a crunchier and crispier texture. The second thing that we didn't have were water chestnuts, but they had lotus root, which is so interesting that you would have one and not the other. But lotus root has a very similar sweetness and kind of like watery, crispy texture to water chestnut. So some minced lotus root can also substitute water chestnut if you happen to have some around. And these will do their part in adding a lovely crispy sweetness and crunchy texture. You know what? These might be like even easier to prepare than water chestnuts, because water chestnuts are small and you gotta peel them, and this one is just like you just lop off 2 pieces and you mince it. I might do it this way from now on. Everything else in the recipe is pretty easy to find: grated ginger and garlic. Another way we're changing up the meatball recipe is we're using beef instead of pork today. Normally we use pork for the Lionshead meatballs, but I wanted to try something a little different. I've done this with lamb before, but since I tried making kind of like a Lionshead meatball method using a beef burger and it turned out really well, I wanted to try making it with beef today. So this is a complete experiment. I really like this tofu just simply because it's shelf stable. I oftentimes, whenever I buy like the tofu in the fridge, I always kind of let them stay there and they go bad. But this stuff, you can just keep it on your shelf and it won't. So half a block of tofu for every pound of beef. Add in these things and these things. Mochi. Oh my God. Dark soy sauce. My dog almost just killed me. Light soy sauce. And you can use my master stock seasoning, or you can use Chinese 5-spice. Now, as with all meatballs, like what you want to put in here is completely up to you. The tofu is pretty important because it's what makes things soft and super, super tender. We're going to basically fry the meatball first before braising it in the tomato sauce. To help keep it together, it needs to be fried, and therefore to keep it nice and soft and tender, the tofu is being incorporated into the beef and the meat. And it might look a little weird right now because the tofu is white, but tofu has this amazing quality of taking on the color and the flavor of anything that it is cooked with. So it will come off a nice, deep, seared meat color once it is done. And the best type of tofu to use for this is firm to extra firm. So once your meat is nice and mixed up, take the meat and gently just shape it into large balls. Tennis balls plus is preferred for this. The whole point of a Lionshead meatball is to be dramatically large. And so we're gonna make sure it actually is that way. With our fry station nice and ready, we've got a pan here ready to collect the finished meatballs. We got the meatballs over there ready to go. I like deep frying in a wok because it doesn't use up as much oil. And we have it nice and set to 350 degrees. Now, bringing it in and just allowing the surface of the meatball itself to cook. This won't cook all the way through. It'll still be raw on the inside, which is fine because we're gonna cook it more slowly in the next step with the tomato sauce. The beef, it fries a lot darker than the pork, which I should have actually figured, because the pork, when pork is cooked, is a lot lighter of a meat. So noticeably, these beef meatballs are much darker. So maybe they don't need to be cooked for quite as long. Now to make the tomato sauce, it's pretty easy. Take your tomatoes into a bowl and then crush them with your hands, reserving all of the juice and the paste and the water to add to the sauce after the tomatoes have been crushed. With the tomatoes crushed, add in, this is about like a can of water mixed in with the paste and the juice that was left. That's all going in the tomato sauce. Now to this, we're gonna add a teaspoon of dried oregano, black pepper, some salt. If you want to add some spice to this, some cayenne or some chili pepper or any kind of like minced chili at this point would be great. I'm just deciding not to do that today. Give everything a little mixy. And then set that aside. Now in a hot pan, you're just gonna take some olive oil, put that in there, let that coat the bottom nicely. Add in 7 cloves worth of sliced garlic, as well as a couple teaspoons of cumin. And just move this around until things start to smell nice and fragrant. We're not trying to cook the garlic all the way through, but we are trying to get it to release its aroma into the oil. Once that is done, add in the tomatoes. Mix everything around. That oil should come to the surface and give everything a nice sheen. And once it starts to bubble, just gently add in the Lionshead meatballs. Just let it cook, covered, for about 10 minutes. Which 11 minutes happens to be, coincidentally, the time it takes to cook a pack of spaghetti. Adding back in the spaghetti and allowing the spaghetti to finish the cook in the sauce so that it absorbs the sauce. Taking off the heat. Some hand-torn shreds of basil in there. Stirred. It should be very fragrant and herbaceous. You notice the spaghetti just essentially just drank all the sauce that was in there. And now for the plating, I would suggest a wide bowl. Just find yourself a lot of strands of spaghetti. Bring it down into the ladle and turn. Now for the comical presentation, you could do it like this. Or you could work on a more equal spaghetti to meatball ratio. Now, admittedly, because this is supposed to be like a cute Valentine's Day cartoon network moment, if you're gonna do it, you're going to split one plate between 2 people. So that's why there is a lot of spaghetti in there, and 2 people can easily eat a meatball. Because I'm not trying to make that little spaghetti kiss thing happen, but it would always be cute if it did. But that being said, spaghetti and giant meatball, I think makes for a pretty good Valentine's Day dinner. And then let's just take a look at this thing up close. Cooked all the way through. It smells super fragrant. It's so tender, it almost like it dissolves in your mouth. And it's so much fun too, because this is obviously Italian American and this is obviously Cantonese. And they both taste so different, but they work so well together. Yeah, give this a try.